Hello, welcome to another episode of Science Talks, a conversation hosted by the University of Arizona's Bio5 Institute. My name is Amy Barber. Today we are joined by Dr. Vanessa Buzzard, a senior research specialist at the University of Arizona School of Environmental and Natural Resources. Dr. Buzzard received her Ph.D. from the University of Arizona in 2017, where she focused on plant functional trait distribution, but has transitioned her studies from natural systems to urban environments. Today, she is a part of Bio5 member Laura Meredith's lab, where she questions the drivers of biodiversity and ecosystem function in relation to the effects of green infrastructure water management on soils in urban environments. Her research aims to quantify shifts in soil health in response to green stormwater infrastructure in Tucson. Dr. Vanessa Buzzard, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So we like to start every podcast off the same way with a few fun rapid fire questions just to break the ice. So these questions are simple and just easy to answer, meant to be just fun. So if you could time travel, when and where would you go?
The Pleistocene. So like 10 to 12,000 years ago when there was megafauna on North America.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. That's really cool. I love that answer. What is your favorite color combination?
Probably an Arizona sunset.
I agree.
Yeah, they change, so it's nice and dynamic.
Yeah, and so beautiful. And you just don't see that anywhere else.
No.
Okay, final question. What is your number one thing on your bucket list?
I think I have too many. National parks. Visiting all of the national parks.
Okay.
Yeah, that's definitely up there.
Do you think for that you'll kind of start now and hit one every now and again, or just do like one big trip sometime?
No, it wouldn't be one big trip. That would be neat.
Right? You'd have to take like 3 months off and
at least,
just go do that.
Yeah. And you would want to hit them at the right times a year. That would be a lot of
planning,
true. But that would be super fun.
Yeah. Well, cool. Thank you. So what brought you to the University of Arizona for your education?
I was given a scholarship. So
Okay.
I was awarded a scholarship in high school to participate in what was called the Achieving Science Education Program. It was a partnership with Pima Community College, and it was 2 years at Pima Community College and then transferred to one of the state schools for Arizona. And I'm a Tucson native, so I figured I would stay home and be close to family and save some money.
That's very economical. And it makes a lot of sense. I feel like I know a lot of people that have chosen to do that as well. And it just makes a lot of sense, including my daughter. She's chosen to do that.
And it's a pretty good school. So that
yeah,
helped.
Absolutely. Yeah. So what was it that brought you to participate in research? You mentioned it was a science scholarship. So
it wasn't a science scholarship.
Oh, it wasn't.
It was just to get a broader range of students to go to college.
Okay. Okay. So what was it that got you into research?
I was planning to work with elephants at some point in my life, or just large, beautiful, charismatic species, which, as we'll learn, has really shifted over time. Met somebody at one of my jobs when I was a teenager who worked with them and said, hey, get a degree in ecology and evolutionary biology. And so on this path to work with large, charismatic animals, I went to Alaska for an internship at a wildlife conservation center.
Oh, fun.
And I met somebody from the University of Arizona who had just finished their master's degree, and they were teaching a bear aware course. And I participated in that, and they said, hey, you really need to take this conservation biology class. I even have the book. I have the book from it. So I took Con Bio and met a couple of really fantastic researchers through that. And so I worked in Bio5 as an undergrad.
Okay.
With Taylor Edwards on conservation of tortoises.
Tortoises, yeah. I was going to say, shout out to Taylor. I love Taylor.
Yeah,
He's great.
Like a fantastic mentor. And then I also worked with somebody named Catherine Holshaw, who was part of Brian Enquist's lab in ecology and evolutionary biology. And yeah, it was fun. Research was cool. Plants, tortoises are charismatic animals, so that was cool. I was actually working with Tucson tortoise, which are part of Pleistocene rewilding, which is really interesting in this area. And so that brought me to research.
Awesome. Yeah, you definitely, well, it answers my next question too, is what brought you to Bio5. So that completely makes sense as to just where you are now, and just you're so ingrained in Bio5, I feel like, and you're here and you're so gracious to give tours of labs, and you're just a staple, and you've made yourself rooted here.
Thanks. Yeah, it's been fun. And Bio5 is just a really cool institution. So I think there's just a lot here, and it shifted my research to plants and soils. So still charismatic.
Yeah.
Microbes are cool. Plants are awesome. And came with Laura Meredith, part of the ecosystem genomics cluster, got housed in Bio5.
Cool. So when did you decide that you wanted to pursue a scientific career?
When I had the opportunity to start asking questions. Like, I got the questions bug.
Curiosity, right?
Curiosity. And really started going through like the scientific method and realizing, hey, look, anybody can do this. What else? And I got to travel. So the cool thing about working with plants is they stay still and you come to them, right? And so like, got to travel a lot of places to see some really cool diversity. And I'm passionate about diversity, so that really kind of helped drive home the pursuit of a scientific career.
Okay. Did you ever have a second plan, or was becoming a researcher always your number one goal?
No. I completed what was it called? It was a teaching science program, which is like secondary education for science teachers, and tries to prepare you for a career teaching anywhere from like middle school and high school students. And my focus there was biology, so I thought about pursuing that career for a while.
Oh, wow. Okay. So was there a pivotal moment in your career or during your education that helped to shape your future?
I think it's that experience of how small the world can be. Like, to Alaska from Arizona, ran into somebody that was just finished their degree at the University of Arizona, and I got some recommendations, and I felt like that connected me with the right people.
Right, the universe is
big and small,
right? Yeah, and it always points you in the right direction ultimately. So.
Yes.
Here you are. I mean, how cool would that be? You're in Alaska, of all places, and you're meeting someone from back home. Yeah. You're like, how easy is that? I don't even have to like move out of state. I can just go to U of A.
It's small, big world. Move away to meet somebody local.
Yeah. So you work in a lab of one of the principal investigators we mentioned earlier, Laura Meredith. Dr. Meredith does work with soil and plants, or could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so Laura Meredith was hired on with the School of Natural Resources and the Environment as part of this ecosystem genomics initiative. And it was a push to bring together a lot of really diverse disciplines that are trying to map ecological processes from gene to large scale atmospheric climate change. And so Dr. Meredith's work really focuses on that interface between the soils and the atmosphere. So what's happening and what gases are microbes that are present in the soils consuming and producing, and what does that exchange look like with consideration of climate change and drought, so water availability.
Okay. Yeah. What got you from animals to soil and plants?
Dr. Catherine Holshaw gave a presentation in ConBio about plant functional traits. And she did a lot of work here. She was a graduate student at the time. And then she was looking for students to kind of help her in the lab gain some experience. And so I reached out and started working with her. Had the opportunity to like travel and see really cool places like Costa Rica and work in the forest there and develop my own research questions. And then it turned to plants.
Okay.
Yeah.
I could see how Costa Rica might inspire something like that.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Wow, what a cool opportunity.
Yeah.
So what would you say is your favorite part of working in Dr. Meredith's lab?
Facilitating research and mentoring. So that like integration of science and education through mentorship is like huge.
Okay.
Yeah, it's my favorite part, working with students, inspiring them to figure out their path in science.
Nice. Can you share any recent exciting discoveries or breakthroughs that the lab has had?
One of the cool projects that I'm leading with others in different departments across campus and within the ASU, Arizona State University in Phoenix. We're looking at slow water practices for plants. So how can we reduce the amount of water that's required to establish trees? And one of the cool things we're seeing is that we cut the amount of water the trees were getting right off the bat in a really cool controlled experiment at the Campus Ag Center, and found that they do great. I mean, not all the species do great, but the species that are pretty commonly used throughout the urban landscape do pretty well when we can reduce their water consumption. So we're showing some cool results there so far. It's been about a year since they've been planted. So
awesome. Is there any possibility you can share one or two kinds of tree? What kind of trees they are?
Yeah, so there's ironwood, which is a really common staple and native to this region. And also canyon hackberry, which is more of a smaller stature tree, and desert willow.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
My husband's very allergic to those desert willow trees.
Yeah, they're beautiful. Their flowers
they're so pretty.
They're so pretty. Yeah. So yeah, the one that's not doing well, I don't know if I should put a shout out there. The one that isn't doing well and does require more water from what we're seeing is oak species. So oaks are also pretty commonly planted throughout the area. They're beautiful when they are established, but during that establishment, they require more water initially.
Okay. I know they do really well back east. They're everywhere back east, and it's definitely got more water just even in the air.
Yeah, and much cooler temperatures. So as you go up like Mount Lemmon, you'll start to see more oaks. A different species of oak. The oak that we are actually looking at here is not native to the area, but it is supposed to be drought tolerant.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Within the constructs of the lab, it is common for lab members to own their own research projects in addition to assisting on the larger goals of the lab. Is that correct?
Yes, definitely. And I think that varies from lab to lab, but for the most part, you are really leading the research and part of the entire research process. So the development and designing experiments to collecting those data and analyzing it and then communicating and interpreting those results. So for a lot of projects, yes, there's a level of ownership that's part of it.
Very cool. Is there a project that you own in particular that you can tell us about?
Yeah, so within the Meredith Lab, I lead all of the rainwater harvesting, green stormwater infrastructure, kind of sustainable development and nature-based solutions research. And so projects that are part of that look at soil and plant health with respect to some urban designs. So when we manage water in our landscape, how does it impact soil health and how can we support
vegetation with reduced or just conservative approaches for watering, because we're a really water limited environment. And it's really important to make sure that we aren't wasting our precious potable water sources on the vegetation outside. I mean, vegetation is so critical to our landscape, and it has a really huge cooling effect in the urban area. So we really need vegetation to help reduce some of the effects of heat island, which are just basically saying that because of all of our built landscape, all of the energy production, all of the concrete and asphalt surfaces, we produce a lot of heat. So how can we help reduce some of that? And vegetation has been shown to really help mitigate some of that heat. But because we're water limited, that's kind of a double-edged sword. We need these trees, but we also need the water to help with establishment. And so can we use that water really strategically to make sure that we have the vegetation to help cool the climate or to cool the environment?
Wow, that's really cool. I think it's really cool. And I admire you researchers that have the curiosity to come up with these kinds of questions and then are able to then put that into a research project or take it to the lab and say, how am I going to help this problem? That's all I wanted to say. I think that's really, really cool. And someone who's not from a research background, I talk to a lot of you guys, and it's just always astounding how you can do that and help humanity. Has this topic been something that you've always been interested in, or did you discover this and then decide this is what you wanted to research in the lab?
I think it's a combination. So part of the work and interest that I had going into the Anquist lab with that collaboration and work with Catherine Holshoff was looking at the impacts of disturbance and land management on plant performance. And we measure that through different attributes and characteristics of plants. So like the leaf size or the density of the wood. So we can look at these plant functional traits. They have some kind of benefit to the reproduction and success of the plants. And I really wanted to look at that locally. So I had hoped to collaborate and work with some of developers around the town to see how, things changed over time. And something that was really cool was that while I wasn't able to do it locally, which is where my heart is at, I got to do that work in Costa Rica and working with people there. So thinking about disturbance and impacts on the landscape and how, these plants may function as they reestablish in these previously disturbed areas.
Okay.
When I moved into the lab, Laura Meredith isn't from Arizona. Okay. She's from a wetter climate, and she thought it was really cool when she moved here, a lot of the water harvesting work that was being done. And so what's really neat is there's an experiment in her backyard to look at the impacts of water harvesting on soil. And so it was a really cool opportunity to build up from there and bring it into an urban setting and think about this from the plant, soil, water continuum.
Okay, so that kind of leads me into my next question. Living in Tucson as long as you have, being a native, were you inspired in any way, or did that inspire your research in any way?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's just been, I guess since, the water crisis of the 80s, 90s, where the city started sinking because we were pulling too much water from groundwater sources. And there is a shift in how can we manage the surface water in a way that benefits the landscape. And so, county started putting in like low impact development, which is like other larger forms of water management systems to direct and store water locally instead of putting it into, not that we have drainage systems like you would see back east or in other areas. Our drainage systems are primarily roads, but there are some drainage systems for stormwater that capture and then push that out of the city center into areas where that water is treated and reused. But can we use it where it lands? And so there's a lot of grassroots efforts to start capturing water. And I feel like I was in college with my undergrad during a time where a lot of that work really started to develop from a grassroots and bottom up perspective as well. So there were a lot of other groups within Tucson, nonprofits, that started to develop and have really become leaders in this work. And with the addition of the City of Tucson's Storm to Shade program and the Million Tree Project, there's been just a lot of inertia around it. So there's that, I've just kind of grasp onto that momentum and say, how can I study the system, and is it restoring natural ecosystem processes? Because that's where my interests lie.
Yeah, and taking it further.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, that's really inspiring. What would you say is the most sustainable town or city in Arizona?
Well, I'm biased because I like Tucson.
Okay.
So Tucson is doing a lot of work, right? And so I feel like they have been leading the way for desert systems with regards to things like water management. We are water limited. And going back to that Alaska comment, there were a lot of people from all over the U.S. That were there also as interns, and just thinking about them learning later in life to turn off the water when they brush their teeth, or to have these more ingrained water practices that I grew up with. Mm-hmm. They've had a lot of these initiatives for water conservation for a long time.
You know, it's funny. I remember, so I'm not native to Tucson.
Mm-hmm.
I'm from New York State. And I remember, but I came here to go to school when I was young. And so I remember those initiatives and the teachers, even in school, teaching you, you know, you turn the water off when you're brushing your teeth. If you're sudsing your hands, turn it off, suds your hands, and then to put it back on. Like certain things that I was not used to at all back east. So things you know, and then I taught my kids, and it's become it's just the way you live here. So
it's funny because it wasn't the mentality, and I didn't realize that before I was exposed to it. Like, oh yeah, that's what we do. You save water. That's just how it is. Like, you don't need the water running while you brush your teeth. And they had set up these little modules in the cafeteria in elementary school that were they were like working sinks and faucets, and you would go through and just practice, like showing like this is what's done. And I don't know how they set any of that up. Maybe I just remember it working, but it didn't really actually have water. I don't know.
Imagination. That's wonderful though. And I know that they still continue to do all of those things today. So I think your work can only inform that further too. Can you tell me more about the Ecology of Water Harvesting course that you teach, and the collaboration with the Landscape Architecture course at CAPLA? As I understand it, it led to some national awards.
Yeah, so the Ecology of Water Harvesting course was actually based off of funding for a collaboration with Boyang in CAPLA. It was to really integrate research between these fields. So we have people who are building the system, and then we have people who want to understand the system, and oftentimes they're working in their own silos. And so this was an opportunity to cross and bridge that gap and work together and say, how are you designing this, and how is it functioning from an ecological perspective? Landscape architects do a lot of that work also. But I feel like with the Ecology of Water Harvest, with the ecology of water harvesting course, students with backgrounds in the natural sciences were able to come in and provide their expertise and gain new experience and new perspectives because of these grand challenges that we have, that we're facing. They have to integrate research across disciplines. We can't continue to work in silos. So it was an opportunity to bridge that and to allow students a new perspective, because being in the natural sciences within the university, I recognized really quickly that I wasn't actually getting exposed to a lot of the arts and, some of these other fields that may have actually, I don't know, I wouldn't say that they would have like shifted what I wanted to do in the end, but they would have given me a different perspective and
inspiration maybe in some areas.
Allowed for creativity. And one of the things that one of the students that mentioned who took that course and participated in the module that went to these national awards was how interesting it was to watch the landscape architect students work through processes and like the creative perspectives that they held and the way they communicated that creativity. So that was really cool. That student mentioned that it was really exciting to be able to see that process and see that creativity and then dive into some of that themselves.
Yeah. And what a benefit for those students. I think you mentioned that this course is no longer being offered. Is that right?
Yeah, so this course is no longer being offered. We were hoping to be able to build on it and have it become part of the curriculum for the School of Natural Resources and the Environment, but kind of absorbed into some of these other courses a little bit, which is sad, but also okay.
Yeah.
And from this work, we continued the collaborations, and part of the really cool part is that with that module that was built and these collaborative course integration for ecology of water harvesting and then the studio design course, it also reached into a green stormwater infrastructure course that's taught by Grant McCormick and at the time Tanya Quest as well. And so it bridged a larger group of people in the university to share ideas and to inspire students. And then the students ran with it. I mean, they created some really great ideas on how can we change the university landscape to be more sustainable and to keep the water locally and to be more engaging and inviting to students. And one of the ideas that we tossed around with that is, can we create kind of a living lab? Can we monitor research? Can we build structures that have dual purposes, that engage with the public and have interpretive signage that talk about green stormwater infrastructure and rainwater harvesting, and how there's over 100 features on campus right now that you may not even be aware of because if you're not from here, it looks maybe just like dirt and some rocks and maybe a few plants. But if you are from here, there's gutter system that's running and downspout that goes into an area and that stores it. But that storage of that water and that capture allows it to slow down and actually infiltrate and become available for plants.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. And does this have an official name to it?
So then that's turned into the Green Stormwater Infrastructure Campus Living Lab. Okay. And so we've moved towards actually installing monitoring systems for soil and atmosphere at 3 locations on campus. And soon enough, they'll all have signage for interpretive and interaction for general public so that they point to the functioning of that landscape. Yes, it has.
Project has a website.
Yes, it does.
Also, and I noticed on there you can click a button and it says live data, and it will take you to, I'm guessing, those 3, because there were 3.
Yep.
Live data from each of those monitoring systems. So
and cool. That dashboard was actually created with the Data Science Institute, the CCT So the University of Arizona's CCT Data Science Institute, in collaboration with them to create a dashboard for interaction with the data that's being collected so that you don't have to try and download data and map it out yourself. You can visualize it right away and in mostly real time. It's really daily updates. And a previous key student was really heavily involved in that once he started at the university as a freshman.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah.
And I love this is another example of collaboration as well, working with the Data Science Institute to have this made. And that's really great. Speaking of keys, you are one of our keys mentors. And so first, thank you doing that for our students. And we've just gotten kicked off with our keys program this summer. And so how is that going so far? This is like first week in the lab.
Yeah. So yesterday I met the key student for the summer and got them set up with all the lab safety training that they needed. And so a lot of really dense readings, and they're actually in the field today. They went to Maricopa Agricultural Center, where they will be working on a research project to look at volatile organic compounds and sorghum genomic varieties. They're looking at sorghum phenotypic varieties that have different growth rates, and then seeing what kinds of volatile organic compounds or VOCs are produced or consumed in the soil in response, or by the plants, but that are buried underground in response to that growth over the season. So that's going to be a fun project.
I was just going to say, that's a fun project for them. Cool. And so for those who don't know, the KEYS program is a 7-week program that the Bio5 Institute hosts during the summer. And we bring in anywhere from 50 to 60 high school students to come in and work side by side with our labs. And at the end, they are able to report out on a poster, a scientific poster of the progress that they made on their project. So thank you for taking in one of our students. So I imagine the answer is yes, because it usually is. But do you have a mentor or 2 or 3 that have impacted your life?
Yes. I mean, there's been quite a few people who have impacted my life at various stages of my career. And I feel like I kind of already mentioned throughout.
Yeah. So what's next for you with regard to your research?
With regard to research is just to continue developing partnerships with the city, state, county, and nonprofits locally to, I think, pivot more to working directly in the communities. Yes, collecting data is fun. Yes, looking at soil processes and soil health and tree health is fun, but also having impact on the community is important. So spending a little bit more time gaining skills in community engagement.
This episode is dedicated to the University of Arizona's former professor and department head of hydrology and atmospheric sciences, Dr. Thomas Meissner.
Thanks to our listeners for tuning in to another episode of Science Talks. Continue the conversation with us next time as we learn more about the amazing science happening at the University of Arizona's Bio5 Institute.